So today we're going to talk a little bit about stretching, specifically static stretching. Now, static stretching is when you hold the stretch for a while. Most people will typically hold it for 20 or 30 seconds, maybe a little bit longer. Think about maybe you've seen somebody just before a run or just after a run. They have their leg back behind them. They grab their foot, they pull it up towards their butt, and they hold that for a while. That's a static stretch. I'm not talking about dynamic stretches where you're moving all the time or maybe only holding for a few seconds. Foam rolling, things like this. This is specifically on static stretching. Of course, the big question people have is, well, how much static stretching should I do? How often should I be doing static stretching? A lot of runners will do static stretching before and after pretty much every run. But here's some potentially good news. Maybe the answer is 0. You might not need to be doing static stretching at all. So, as long as you have enough running range of motion, you really don't need to static stretch, at least in that particular area. You might have others. The best thing to do is some tests to find out whether or not you have the right range of motion. Now, a few weeks ago, I did some videos. I talked about these books by Jay Sherry. One is Anatomy for Runners. The other is Running Rewired. I'm sure there are other resources out there, but he will take you through a series of tests to find out whether or not you have enough range of motion. For example, and this is from memory, from a hamstring perspective for distance runners, as long as you can get to about 70% on your hamstring, you have enough running range of motion. Now, can you get a greater range of motion in the hamstrings? Absolutely. Will it help your running? No, because 70% is enough for the running motion, but as long as you have 70, that's good enough. It's obviously not just the hamstring. There's lots of muscles you test. You find out, and the fact is, if you have enough range of motion, you don't need to be doing static stretching at all unless you feel like doing it, but it's probably not going to benefit you from a running standpoint. But what if you do? What if you find out that, I'll use my hip flexors as an example. If I do a hip flexor test, I don't pass that test. I need more range of motion in my hip flexors. So to correct that, what you really need to do is you need to try and elongate the muscles. And that's quite the process. In fact, I need to hold that stretch for 3 to 5 minutes. I need to do that 5 times a week, and I need to do that for 10 to 12 weeks to truly get that muscle elongated. So let me repeat those. 3 to 5 minutes, 5 times a week, 10 to 12 weeks to really get that elongation. So if I'm doing my hip flexor stretch and I do it for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, I might feel better, but I'm actually not going to do much to get that muscles elongated to keep them from that chronic shortened position and do a little bit better. Now, when should you do it? Very common to see people do, first of all, when they're doing those static stretches for 20 seconds, they're not doing any good, but they'll typically do them before the run, sometimes after the run. You should never do static stretching before running. Again, I want to clarify, I'm talking about the static where you hold it. I'm not talking about dynamic warm-ups. But static stretching, you never do it before running because study after study after study has shown that when you do static stretching, even those 20 and 30 second ones before running actually negatively impacts your run. And that's because you want a little bit of tension in the muscles because they're going to spring better when you run, and you tend to negate that a little bit with the static stretching before a run. So always do your static stretching after running on warm muscles. It doesn't have to be immediately after the run. 3 to 5 minutes is a long time. You might do that later in the day, but try and have them warmed up. I will touch real quickly dynamic stretching where you're holding it for just a couple of seconds, maybe 5 seconds, foam rolling, massage guns, things like that. Those are absolutely things that you probably need to be doing. They're different than static stretching. What those are trying to do is trying to make sure that you've got good fluidity around the joints. They're trying to make sure that the muscles can expand, contract effectively, that they can glide. So those you probably want to be doing, at least I certainly want to be doing those. But when it comes to static stretching, take a test because you might find out you don't need to do it at all.